Welcome to Cube FM. Can you tell us about who you are, what you do, your role, and where do you work?
Yeah, so my name is Gabriel Elmaner. I am the VP of DevRel at Permit.io. Long years developers who crossed the line to more business developer relation role 2 years ago. Permit.io is a startup that is focused in solving authorization for developer. Authorization is a problem that is growing, is a challenge that's growing for the last couple of years. And Permit has end-to-end platform for developers who want to implement authorization in their application. So from modeling permissions to enforce them to query permissions of a user of a resource, everything is in the Permit platform. Developer can choose take one thing from Permit or just run all their authorization with Permit.
Now, Gabriel, what do you want to share with us today?
I think the main thing is that we are going to KubeCon. We're very exciting about it. That's not our first KubeCon or either my first KubeCon. We've been KubeCon many times. I think one of the most exciting thing that we are going to do in KubeCon is that we are going to announce a new pricing tier and set of feature for startups. Traditionally, authorization was something that belonged for large enterprise. I always like to say that one of the most common sentences by developer is like, we'll do RBAC later. RBAC is like a known term for permissions. And we see that change. We see that a lot of startups want to start their product, to start their deployment with authorization. And we have now a special tier for startup and B2C application that help them implement permissions, fine-grained permissions in about dozens of dollars a month, which is cheaper than cheaper significantly than any other solution, and for sure than develop it themselves.
What problem or which problems does the permit platform solve?
I always like to look on what changed for the last year that make authorization that significant problem. Having permissions in application is something that is old as the days of human using computer, right? And usually it was quite simple. Maybe I'm not say simple, but people used to implement that themselves. They used to model permissions with roles or maybe access control list. But for the last couple of years, first, the amount of data that we are processing is growing exponentially, and we need to make sure that it all has the right permission for the users. The cloud native, which is the maybe the most important one, especially for the KubeCon, or sometimes people forget, but it's also cloud native con. And we are on the cloud native con part. We are not selling something for KubeCon. We are selling something for cloud native developers. The cloud native made our applications, they need velocity. So we want to make sure that nothing is broke when we deliver new software. And that distributed, so we need to make sure that the permissions is streamlined across all our microservices. We want to make sure that is also enforced in the level of APIs, users, backends, database, etc. And another thing which is also, I believe, very important is our users. The users has now requirements, privacy requirements, security requirements. The user want to make sure that the data is private and no one can get where they shouldn't get to. And I think these three challenges, the cloud native architectures, the amount of the data, and the user requirement, made authorization, and particularly fine-grained permission, fine-grained authorization, something that you don't want to develop yourself, or it's too complex. And hence, where platforms like Permit.io get into the picture. We understand that authorization is not a problem that is completely solved as an externalized product. You can't just externalize authorization like you externalize authentication, because probably you have some business logic part that are part of your permission model. You need to do some configuration, etc., and it's continuous. Authentication is something that happened once. User verified their identity, then they're allowed. Authorization is something that could happen 5 or 10 times per one API endpoint. So we try to have a platform that you can use what you need from or what you can save you time, and then you can develop or integrate the things that you want to write or you want to control yourself.
Now, can you share with our audience the before and after of this product announcement?
Yeah, so I think the before is clear. We saw a lot of users starting with Permit, and then they say, okay, we have. So let me share about the old pricing model, the pro pricing model, which is a pricing model that is aimed for enterprise applications. So it's driven by monthly active users, the users that you authorize or check permissions, and the tenant in your system, the account. For enterprise, that make a lot of sense. But for growing startups and for B2C applications, you probably have thousands of users with mostly no tenants, and with our traditional pricing tier, permit get really expensive. So they choose maybe go with one of our open source solutions or just choose another. This is why we decide to go with the new startup tier that is very cheap, even if you have like you can get even for, I don't know, 20K users in your platform for less than $200 or something like that. I can't remember the exact number, but it gets really cheaper for people who just want to implement permissions as from the first day. And then if they are growing to be more B2B or the startup is growing, then they can go to the pro. I'll say something important, that what not changed before and after. Permit has a policy of no blackout features. Our pricing model is not dependent on the features that you have in your application. Everyone is open with all the features. Everything that is allowed in permit platform is even allowed with the free tier. The only thing that we control with the pricing is quota and some more enterprise stuff like SSO and stuff like that, but that's not something that a free tier or startup actually needs.
Is the Permit platform open source and part of the CNCF landscape?
So Permit is not an open core product. It's a product that has a lot of open source, and Permit also is a maintainer of a project called OPAL, Open Policy Administration Layer. The CNCF landscape, many of us know Open Policy Agent, OPA, OpenFGA. They are both great policy engines, but when you need to connect them to a modern application, it could be hard. You need to manage deployment, you need to synchronize policy, you need to synchronize data. OPAL, Open Policy Administration Layer, is actually a large product. It has 5K stars on GitHub and a large community around it. And of course, you're invited to contribute. And this is a project that aims to solve the problem of authorization for application developers by using policy engines. Permit, of course, use OPAL as its core engine. And everything that runs on the user side is actually open source. So no matter if that's the Opal part that you are checking permission with, all our SDKs, everything that related to plugins and CLI where you can do everything, our main agenda is that everything run on customer side, everything run on the user side is open source. They can see what they run, and probably many of them they are contribute. That's connected to the point that I mentioned before. Authorization is a problem that still keep the developer engaged with your product because they need it for the business need. They need it to integrate it deeply than some other product. And we see a lot of contribution even to things that are not traditional open source. For example, our SDK get a lot of contribution from the community. We have now a new tool we call Permit CLI, which is a CLI tool for developers who do fine-grained authorization that let them do things like visualize permission graphs or control use infrastructure as code for policy configuration, et cetera, et cetera.
And I know you mentioned it briefly in a previous question, but what is Permit.io's business model?
Yeah, so the business model, we've been talking about the pricing tier, and I think that correlate very good with that. And I already mentioned, we are charging per monthly active user. Every unique user could be a service, every unique, let's call it subject, every unique entity or identity that you check permissions for is considered as an active user, and you pay for the unique ones you have in a month. I'll say it's monthly active users. So it doesn't matter if you have million users, if only 1,000 of them logged in and checked permission, you'll pay only 4,000. That's the main business model. So the free tier is up to 1,000 monthly active user. Up to 1,000 monthly active user, you can use Permit however you want. And again, we don't have any kind of blackout features. So all the features is open you from the day one, at the free tier. Then we are charging again per monthly active users, depending the startup and the enterprise in the way that you model your users inside Permit. And in the startup, we have also limitation for, I think, 25K users in your app. But we don't have any kind of limitation on the seats of the developers in the product, on the instances that you are running to check permissions, on the everything that actually configured. Everything is open. Of course, there are some limitation on the amount of the rules, for example, that you configure, because we need to find some way to limit the usage. People will not abuse because they don't have enough users. But that's not something that any standard or even standard plus user will understand or see when they are using the system.
And who are your main competitors?
I know it maybe sounds like a cliche, but that's one of the things that I really like to say as a DevRel. Your main competitor as a developer tool is the developers themselves. The main thing that we heard from developers, but I can do that myself. Every time I'm publishing content, I always get these Reddit comments, hey, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't roll out your authorization. You should do it yourself. From the competitor side, I think one of the things to look at the CNCF landscapes or Styra, the company that is maintaining the Open Policy Agent project. They are mainly, and if you are in the CNCF, they are mainly not sell to the application developers. They are selling to DevOps who control admissions policies for Kubernetes, but they will also sell you OPA and OPA Enterprise if you want to do that for your application authorization. I'll get another kind of competitor, OpenFGA, another great CNCF project that backed by Okta and also offered as part of the Okta FGA, which is the commercial product of OpenFGA. And there are some small competitors, to name some, Osso, Acerto, Cerbos. They are all developing their policy engine themselves. I think something important when considering competitors in our space is that Permit is not building the policy engines. We have the platform for authorization, but you choose what policy engine we are running in behalf of you. So it can be, of course, Open Policy Agent. We are using Open Policy Agent as our main engine. But if you want, for example, to run your policy with Cedar language, which is another kind of policy engine, or with OpenFGA, or in the future with some other policy engines, that of course is possible. And one of the nice things with Permit is that you can extend. So you can, for example, get OPA Enterprise and get Permit only for modeling the policy and then continue to run your OPA with your OPA Enterprise or Styra DAS offering. You can the same do for example, so one of the thing, some of our customers, they are using AVP, AWS Verified Permissions, a product for running Cedar language or Cedar policies, and they use Permit to manage their deployments for policy engines. So Permit is a platform. It has competitors, I mentioned some, but it also completes some features that are missing with some that can consider competitors.
Last but not least, what can we expect next regarding the Permit platform and Permit more broadly?
I think we are a startup that's growing really fast. People who are, following see that we always get, more and more large users and more engagement in the community. I think one of the most exciting projects that we start to work on is the Permit CLI. Again, the CLI that is a developer tool for the individual developer that need to do work around authorization, need help with modeling permissions, need help for checking signal permission, need help with setting up CI/CD for permissions. So everything in this Permit CLI, and that also allows us to release features much faster. One of the things with Permit is a cloud UI, which allows you to configure policies, but sometimes we just want to check something, check how people react to something, check what make people easier to configure permissions. The Permit CLI will allow us to deliver it much faster. I also mentioned OpenFGA, so we are soon close to general availability of supporting OpenFGA natively in Permit. That can really make change for many that consider Permit, but they don't want to stick with OPA. They prefer the model of OpenFGA. And in general, the authorization is growing. We see every day more and more users who want to do fine-grained authorization and fine-grained permissions in their application. And we hope that we all together as a market will grow it and make application more secure and with better experience, because permission is something that really affect experience. No one want to get to a screen and get banned or access a screen. I mean, maybe you want to access a screen that you're not allowed to, but probably the developers don't want to. So yeah.
Well, Gabriel, thank you very much for all the hard work you're doing, and look forward to hearing about what's going on next for Permit. Take care. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.